Hey everyone, today I'm going to talk about the priesthood and sacrifices for sin atonement without a Messiah being in the picture. Shalom everybody, and welcome to Beit Tefillah. I've been asked quite a bit lately, well, without a Messiah, what about the high priesthood and sacrifices to atone for sin? How does that work? And some people have gone so far lately to accuse me of avoiding answering these questions when I already spoke about this in my Q&A for the series that they must not have seen, but I already talked about it there. So I thought I'd do a standalone video on these couple topics today and go into the issues just a little bit deeper. So let's get started. When the children of Israel were in bondage in Mitzrayim, or Egypt, they were not doing sacrifices. Why? Because those things were suspended during that time. According to the Torah, we're not allowed to just sacrifice just anywhere and just by anybody however you want to. Okay? They have to be in the place where Yahuwah has placed his name and performed by people he has set up and set apart to do these things using specific animals and things and certain ways and instructions for them to be accepted. Or they're not going to be accepted and then you're just killing an animal for nothing. Okay? It has to be in the place where he put his name and done in a certain way. They couldn't do that when they were in bondage in Egypt, so they were suspended. Keeping that in mind, we cannot just sacrifice any old place we want to or anywhere in the world where we have been scattered in the dispersion. Let's read a couple verses starting with Hosea 3, 4-5. For many days the children of Israel are to remain without sovereign and without prince and without slaughtering and without pillar and without shoulder garment or house idols. Afterward the children of Israel shall return and seek Yahuwah their Elohim and David their sovereign and fear Yahuwah and his goodness in the latter days. Isaiah 11:11. And it shall be that in that day Yahuwah sets his hand again a second time to recover the remnant of his people who are left. Yahuwah is coming a second time to recover his remnant. Just Elohim. Zechariah 10:9. Though I sow them among peoples, among the nations, the Goyim, they shall remember me in places far away, and they shall live together with their children, and they shall return. They're going to return to the covenant, to everything Elohim set forth back in that day. So I always read Deuteronomy 30, 1-4. That's what Zechariah is talking about here. So we will be gathered again one day and be brought back into the land by Elohim. Remember we're told in the scriptures that the sacrifices are going to be started up at the end for a very short time? Well, this is after we are gathered to one place where he placed his name. The sacrifices are started up to ratify the new covenant in blood, just like the first one was ratified in blood when Moses, slaughtered the bull and he dipped the hyssop in the blood and sprinkled it on the people in the book of the covenant. Well, it's going to be ratified when we have the new covenant, and then we go into eternity where no man has to teach everyone to his neighbor. Everybody's going to know the name of Elohim, and the Torah is going to be written on our hearts. Does that make sense? That's why that's going to happen. But meanwhile, before this happens, we cannot sacrifice to Elohim. Deuteronomy 12, 13-14. Guard yourself that you do not offer your burnt offerings in every place that you see, except in the place which Yahuwah chooses. In one of your tribes, there are you to offer your burnt offerings, and there you are to do all that I command you. Here's a great example of not just anyone being able to do sacrifices. During the time, they were still doing sacrifices. We're going to read here next about King Saul after he began to reign as king. Well, he got into it with the Philistines and he got them all upset, and this huge army of Philistines comes down to make war with the children of Israel. Well, the people of Israel were very afraid, and they were waiting for the prophet Samuel to show up in Gilgal, where they were waiting, and they were kind of cowering and kind of looking at King Saul going, okay, where is this guy? So after a period of almost a week, and Samuel still being a no-show, King Saul figured that he'd take matters into his own hands, and this is what is recorded in 1 Samuel 13, 8-14. And he speaking of King Shaul, waited for 7 days according to the appointment with Samuel. But Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and the people were scattered from him. Shaul said, "Bring a burnt offering and peace offerings here to me." And he offered the burnt offering. And it came to be, as he had finished offering the burnt offering, look, Samuel came. Shaul went out to meet him to bless him, and Samuel said, "What have you done?" Shaul said, "Because I saw that the people were scattered from me, and that you did not come within the days appointed, and that the Philistines gathered at Michmash, so I said, the Philistines are going to come down on me at Gilgal, and I have not appeased the face of Yahuwah. So I felt compelled." See, now he's thinking what he's going to do instead of listening to Elohim, and offered a burnt offering. And Samuel said to Shaul, "You have been foolish. You have not guarded the command of Yahuwah your Elohim, which he has commanded you. For now Yahuwah would have established your reign over Yisrael forever." Wow. "But now your reign is not going to stand. Yahuwah shall seek for himself a man after his own heart." Wonder who that is. "And Yahuwah shall command him to be leader over his people, because you have not guarded what Yahuwah commanded you." How sad, right? Well, I guess King Shaul had forgotten what the prophet of Elohim had told him just a short time before this, as recorded earlier in 1 Samuel 10:8. "And you, King Shaul, shall go down before me to Gilgal. And see, I am coming down to you to slaughter burnt offerings and make peace offerings. Wait 7 days till I come to you, then I shall make known to you what you should do." Elohim speaks through his prophets, and he was going to make known to King Shaul what he was supposed to do with his whole mess with the Philistines. And if you read 1 Chronicles chapter 6, you will see that Samuel was a Levite as well. After all, it's written back in chapter 3 of 1 Samuel, in 1 Samuel 3:1, "And the young Samuel was serving Yahuwah before Eli." So Samuel was already in service in the tabernacle back then, right? Or the temple. So he was the one set apart by Elohim to be able to do these burnt offerings and these sacrifices. King Saul was king. He wasn't allowed to just do it. So that's a big clue. Now, King Shaul had been a righteous king and greatly favored in the eyes of Elohim. After all, we just heard the prophet Samuel say that Elohim was going to establish King Shaul's reign over Israel forever. Well, Elohim took it from King Shaul for his disobedience shortly after this, and the reign was then prepared and given to King David. But if you remember, after David killed Goliath, and Shaul was jealous of David and kind of afraid of him, and that story about when David snuck into the cave and cut off the tzitzit to show him, "Look, I could have killed you while you slept, but I didn't do that." And David's men were curious and said, "Why didn't you take King Shaul's life since he'd been trying to kill you?" And David replied with 1 Samuel 24:6. "So he said to his men, Far be it from me, by Yahuwah, that I should do this matter to my master, anointed of Yahuwah, to stretch out my hand against him, for he is the anointed, or the Moshiach, of Yahuwah." So King Saul was a Moshiach of Elohim, and he was not allowed to make sacrifices. Samuel knew this, and this is why he was upset at King Shaul for disobeying Elohim. And he told him in 1 Samuel 15:22, "Then Samuel said, Does Yahuwah delight in burnt offerings and slaughterings as in obeying the voice of Yahuwah? Look, to obey is better than an offering. To heed is better than the fat of rams." A lot of people quote that, but this is why Samuel said that. Because if King Shaul would have only obeyed and waited on the prophet Samuel, he wouldn't have gotten in all this trouble, and the reign wouldn't have been torn from him. Because you know what? If we obey Elohim, then there's no need for sacrifices and burnt offerings, because that was for when we sinned. If we keep Torah, we don't sin. That's what he's saying. To obey is better than an offering, because Elohim seeks our obedience above all else. Our loyalty and our obedience to him and his word. Now I also want to talk about something else. I realize the following is not a sacrifice, but people need to be aware of something with us being in the dispersion. I see a lot of people making the mistake of killing their own lamb on their property for Passover, when Elohim has instructed the following, as recorded in Deuteronomy 16:5-7. Listen carefully, those people who are doing this. "You are not allowed to slaughter the Passover within any of your gates, which Yahuwah your Elohim gives you, But at the place where Elohim chooses to make his name dwell, there you slaughter the Passover. In the evening, at the going down of the sun, at the appointed time, you come out of Mitzrayim. And you shall roast and eat it in the place which Yahuwah your Elohim chooses. You shall kill it, you shall roast it, and eat it in the place which Yahuwah your Elohim chooses. And in the morning you shall turn and go to your tents. So you can't kill it and you can't eat it anywhere you want to. It has to be in the place where Elohim chooses. Very important. So everyone who's killing a lamb on their own property for Passover to eat it, please be aware of these few verses in Deuteronomy 16. Not good. All right? However, every year we have an appointed time, or a moed, to make ourselves low in repentance for our sin. This is Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. Leviticus 16:29-34. And this shall be for you a law forever. In the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, you afflict your beings, and you do no work, the native or the stranger who sojourns among you. For on that day he makes atonement for you, to cleanse you, to be clean from all your sins before Yahuwah. It is a Sabbath of rest for you, and you shall afflict your beings, a law forever. And the priest who is anointed, okay, now listen to this, everything that has to be done in just the proper order for this to be accepted. And the priest who is anointed and ordained to serve as a priest in his father's place shall make atonement, shall put on linen garments, the set-apart garments, and he shall make atonement for the most set-apart place, make atonement for the tent of meeting, and for the altar, and make atonement for the priests, and for all the people of the assembly. And this shall be for you a law forever, to make atonement for the children of Yisrael for all of their sins once a year. And he did as Yahuwah commanded Moshe. Now, look at all that stuff that had to be done just right and in the proper order by the proper priesthood for atonement to be made. You mess something up, no sin atonement. And a few chapters later, we read kind of a rehash or a recap of that in Leviticus 23:27-32. On the 10th day of the 7th month is the Day of Atonement. It shall be a set-apart gathering for you. And you shall afflict your beings, and shall bring an offering made by fire to Yahuwah. And you shall do no work on that same day, for it is the Day of Atonement, to make an atonement for you before Yahuwah our Elohim. For any being who is not afflicted on that same day, he shall be cut off from his people. And any being who does any work on that same day, that being I shall destroy from the midst of his people. You do no work, a law forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings. It is a Sabbath of rest to you, and you shall afflict your beings. On the 9th day of the month at evening, from evening to evening, you observe your Shabbat. While we do not make sacrifices or offerings by fire where we are on the dispersion, we are afflicted on this day, as we know that one day Elohim is going to have a great day of atonement where the righteous are going to have their sins atoned for, their obedient people will, and the wicked will not. So we are to keep the moed to the very best of our ability. Now I want to switch gears and discuss a few things about the priesthood, or the high priest. I've had a couple people email me this past week, and it's very timely, asking what's the deal with Psalm 110, since it seems to talk about a Messiah being made a high priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. So we're going to talk about this first. This part of Psalms is very confusing to many people, a lot of preachers and pastors and messianics, as they try to connect Psalm 110 to a New Testament Messiah, which it certainly does not connect to him in any way, even though they think it does, and that's why we're going to go over this. So let's break it down, verse by verse, and see what's actually being discussed, starting with verse 1. Psalm 110, verse 1. Yahuwah said to my master, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. And in the King James Version, that verse reads as the following, Psalm 110:1. The Lord said unto my Lord, sit thou at my right hand until I make thine enemies thy footstool. So if you're reading this in your King James scriptures, notice the second Lord is not in all caps as the first one is. The first one in all caps is obviously referring to Yahuwah. Anytime you see L-O-R-D in all caps in your King James Bible, that's talking about Elohim. Okay, they replaced Yahuwah with the Lord. Not good, but that's something for another video. Now, the second Lord, that's not in all caps, comes from the Hebrew Ladineh, which means to my master. This word is used several times in the Tanakh, and it always refers to a man. It's not a Messiah figure it's talking about. We're going to look at a couple different examples for that word Ladonai, translated as Lord, in Genesis 18:12. And Sarah laughed within herself, saying, After I become worn out, will I have smooth flesh? And also, my master is old. Her master was her husband, Abraham. Speaking of Abraham, when Abraham sent his servant out to go find a wife for his son Isaac, it's recorded in Genesis 24:54. Then he and the men with him ate and drank, and they spent the night. When they arose the next morning, he said, Give me leave to go to my master. Ladane, to my master. That, once again, was speaking of Abraham. Okay, that is Lord, not in all caps. So this master being referred to in the case of Psalm 110 verse 1 is King David. Okay, because it's a psalm of King David. Psalm 110:2. Yahuwah sends your mighty scepter out of Sion, rule in the midst of your enemies. Well, a king rules, and a scepter is a sign of the king's authority, right? So this is speaking of King David's scepter and David's rule. Psalm 110:3. Your people volunteer in the day of your might, in the splendors of set-apartness. From the womb, from the morning, you have the dew of your youth. This is still referring to King David. All right, next one, Psalm 110:4. Yahuwah has sworn and does not relent. You are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. This is where they get this. Obviously, this is the verse in question. But a couple things about this verse. Notice it just says priest. It doesn't say you are a high priest forever. It just says priest. You are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. Now, the Hebrew Kohen here is used for priest, but it can also mean a chief ruler or a prince. It doesn't necessarily mean a priest as in working for the priesthood, and the word Kohen is a priest for somebody who could be a priest for a false god. And we see that in this next verse, which is also the Hebrew Kohen, and is referring to a pagan and Egyptian ruler. And we hear this in Genesis 41:45. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphath-Paneah, and he gave him a wife, Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, priest of On. On was a pagan god of the Egyptians, and he was a Kohen or a priest of that false god. So we can see right there, it's not always referring to Elohim's priesthood, okay? And we know Melchizedek comes from two words, Melech, which means king, and Zadik, which means righteousness, or the king of righteousness. Melech Zedek. Was David not a righteous king? Yes, he was. David, Melchizedek. Psalm 110:5. Yahuwah at your right hand shall smite sovereigns in the day of his wrath. It says, Yahuwah at your right hand shall smite. So whoever people think this is not smiting. Yahuwah is doing the smiting, as of your right hand is a Hebrew idiom meaning that's where your power is coming from. That's who's at your right hand, the one with the authority. And we all the power in the world is from Elohim. It doesn't matter what high priest is, doesn't matter who the king is, Yahuwah is the one with the power and all esteem. This is all about giving esteem to our Elohim, okay? So that's the story with Psalm 110. It doesn't have anything to do with a New Testament Messiah or a Messiah being established as our high priest now. People keep throwing that into the mix, so I wanted to clear that up as they use this chapter and especially this verse from the Tanakh to prove that they have a high priest in this Messiah. No. All right, I wanted to talk about that because when I was writing this for this video, I was doing a lot of research on Google and all these different sites, trying to figure out, okay, let's see where Christians and Messianics and Hebrew rooters and that, where do they find things in the Tanakh that give credence to this Yeshua or Jesus from the New Testament being made the high priest now? And I kept running into a lot of different websites that were saying the same thing, that had headings similar to 20 verses about Jesus or Yeshua becoming or being our high priest. They all have one thing in common. The only verse that they pick from the Tanakh that they use is what we just read in Psalm 110 verse 4 that we saw was pertaining to King David, not any New Testament Messiah. All the rest of their sources are from the book of Hebrews in the New Testament. Now, there's maybe more than that, but I'm just talking about the most common ones that they use to say, see, this shows you that he's our high priest. They picked that one verse out of the Tanakh from Psalm 110. The rest is all from the New Testament. So, since we proved that Psalm 110:4 and we saw was all about King David, once again we have zip, zero, zilch, and nada from the Tanakh, or not one word from Elohim that he'd be sending a Messiah to be our high priest. Nothing. let alone some guy from the tribe of Judah who cannot be a high priest anyway, since a priesthood was to stay with the tribe of Levi or Levi forever. So, here's the bottom line. The priesthood performed the temple duties and did the sacrifices in the place where Elohim chose. We have no temple today, and Elohim's people are scattered all over the face of the earth in the dispersion. We can't have high priests all over the earth where just everyone lives, and not just anyone can do sacrifices, especially not any place that they choose. That's why slaughtering a lamb for Passover within your gates is a horrible idea, because you're going right against Torah when you're trying to keep a moed in Torah of Passover. You're breaking it before you even get it started. So just as it was for the children of Israel back then is just as it is for the children of Israel now. The priesthood and the sacrifices are suspended or on hold until Elohim gathers us once again as one people to the place that he chooses. Hosea 1:10. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which is not measured nor counted. And it shall be in the place where it was said to them, You are not my people, that they shall be called, You are the sons of the living Elohim. You know, back when we were in churchianity and keeping all the pagan feasts, and back when we thought we had a Messiah, but we were still in idolatry, we were not Elohim's people. But coming away from all of that and walking according to the Torah that Elohim gave us, following the ancient path, we have become his people. We are his remnant. We are Yisrael. Hallelujah for him bringing us out of the world, out of idolatry, and out of religion. Shalom to all of Elohim's people, scattered worldwide in the dispersion, who are truly Yisrael. Everybody be blessed and have a wonderful day.